title this World War II Part 6, The European Theater. Where we're going to start off is with the beginning of World War II as far as we're concerned. September 1st, 1939, this is when Germany attacks Poland. This came right after the Nazi-Soviet pact became official. The Nazi-Soviet pact was basically Hitler's way of avoiding a two-front war. So he learned from World War I. And the downfall of the Germans in World War I is that they could not follow the Schlieffen Plan, which led to a two-front war, which just wore Germany down. So he's trying to avoid that. Now, both sides know that this isn't going to last long. It's not a, they understand that. But Stalin's buying time, and so is Hitler, for that matter. So he can conquer Western Europe, and then he could focus all his forces on Stalin. So as soon as that becomes official, the attack on Poland is on. However, not only did the Nazis attack Poland, but so did the Soviets. Okay, and they agreed to basically split it. Now that, once again, isn't going to last very long. But they agreed to divide Poland up and other parts of Europe as well in this Nazi-Soviet pact. Okay, so the Soviets were also aggressors, and at the time Stalin is basically trying to get a buffer zone between himself and the Nazis because he knows at one point it's going to be on. The German forces launched a swift, massive attack against Poland using planes and tanks. The Poles were using their old cavalry units, the horses, the horseback riders, and hopelessly outmatched. Okay, and we'll see the Blitzkrieg is what it'll be called, also called Lightning War. It's basically a coordinated war effort to occupy and cover as much territory as possible in the beginning of the war. And so you'll see some massive gains by the Germans in this Blitzkrieg. Okay. The Luftwaffe, led by Hermann Göring, is going to be one of the main forces of that Blitzkrieg. They'll come in and basically create absolute havoc in the early portions of the Blitzkrieg and basically just create chaos. And then followed very quickly by the tanks and then their infantry as well. So that's why they call it Lightning War. Okay? And at this point, Germany's army basically is unmatched. Okay, yes, they weren't allowed to mass an army, but nobody stopped them. So now they have the best tanks, the best weapons at this point in the war effort. September 3rd, war is declared. The Brits and the French realized that the policy of appeasing Hitler had failed, and the Nazis embarked on a plan of world domination. France and England went to the aid of Poland and declared war on Germany. British Prime Minister Neville Chamberlain actually sent an ultimatum to Hitler to stop by 11 a.m. or war at 11:15. And that's exactly what happens. Okay? Obviously, Hitler's going to ignore that, and we'll have war. England declares war, and France will follow. So the Munich Conference officially failed. Okay, now granted, guys, it's easy to look back. Hindsight's 20/20, but the Munich Conference is a failure. Less than a month, Poland is conquered. Okay, and just to give you an idea, the U.S. military at the time ranked 17th in the world, below Poland. Okay, and it took Hitler 27 days to conquer Poland. So that raised some eyebrows in America, big time. Now, England and France, they declared war on Germany, but they won't send any troops to Poland. They consider Poland a lost cause. That was unfortunate for the Polish. They're begging for help, and they just chose to try to fortify the western boundaries. What they will do is they'll blockade Germany, which was somewhat successful. They'll blockade them, so no goods are going to go in and out of those ports. But they also are going to kind of spread out their navy at the same time, because with the Luftwaffe flying around, they're also pretty vulnerable. They also were going to stay behind the Maginot Line. Now, the Maginot Line was what the French were trying to build, and there's some pictures of it. You can still see this today. It was basically a line of forts all the way down the German and French border, and it was basically a false sense of security, okay, especially with the new modern warfare. Now, with World War I, this thing would have been awesome, but this isn't World War I. There were lots of new technology out there, and so they're going to hide behind that. And the crazy part is it's not even complete. You can look at this map, you see some big gaps. And where did the Germans attack from in World War I? Belgium. You don't see the Maginot Line there, do you? So we're going to kind of see a repeat. In the winter of 39 and 40, we call this the phony war, because what the Germans do, what Hitler has his armies do, is they mass some divisions right here to make it look like they're going to attack, and stage some little fighting and here and there, but in actuality, the majority of the forces are going to do exactly what they did in World War I and go through Belgium. So we'll talk about it in a second. But the Maginot Line was basically a false sense of security, and not very effective. Pretty cool, but not very effective. Now, in April of 1940, okay, neutral Denmark and Norway have now been taken by the Nazis. They were absolutely crushed. Didn't put up much of a fight. Neville Chamberlain resigns, and Winston Churchill takes over. There he is, the bulldog. Basically, Churchill is the one that has been saying this whole time that appeasement is a mistake, so now he's going to get his shot. In May of 40, we see neutral Belgium falls to the Nazis. So we see the end of the phony war. Okay, the phony war is over. Hitler will overrun Holland as well. Northern France will fall. The Maginot Line is outflanked. They just go around it. Okay, and Hitler shows what he does. His favorite targets: large cities with large civilian populations. Okay, called civilian warfare. Total destruction. In fact, just an example, the Dutch army suffered fewer casualties than the city of Rotterdam. It's a shock value. Okay, I'm going to attack these major cities, and the soldiers might want to go home to take care of their families. You know, that's what that's their goal, and it was successful. So, as this is happening, the Germans have the Allies totally on the run and basically have them trapped. Okay, this thing happens so quickly. The Allied forces, the British and French forces, are basically backpedaling, and they get almost pushed into the sea at a city called Dunkirk. Okay, 400,000 men are trapped at Dunkirk, and here is a picture of this. Here is the Dunkirk. There's also Canadian troops there as well, and you can see that these are the German forces are just pushing in. They're basically going to push them into the ocean or to the English Channel. And so after taking Belgium and Holland, the Allies are pushed to the sea. Nazis will encircle the French and British at Dunkirk, and this is where we have the event called the Miracle at Dunkirk. Hundreds of small boats, anything that could float, will rescue the most important asset of the Allies, and that is men. Okay, they will literally leave behind all their equipment and try to block the roads to slow the German advance with that equipment. And as you can see on these boats, you can see the men swimming out to the boats here. You can see the men on these little rowboats trying to get rescued. The whole time they're under fire from the Luftwaffe, and basically they lose their equipment, but they save the most valuable asset, that is the men. And that's a very important factor. Okay. The fall of France comes 17 days after 17 days of fighting. So France falls within 17 days of fighting, and there it is right here. And what happens with France is a little complicated, but we'll go into that in a second. Here is Hitler at the Eiffel Tower. Now Mussolini will declare war on England and France as well, so he's into the fray at this point. In June of 1940, this is how quick this all is happening. Paris falls, okay, and Paris is captured. Members of the French Parliament who wanted to resist were voted down, and so Paris surrenders, okay, and they actually have a 84-year-old World War I hero chosen as the new premier of France, and basically it's going to become a puppet state, and that his name will be Marshal Pétain, and he'll be Hitler's puppet. Okay, he'll ask Hitler for an armistice, and he's not really the leader, as I just said, but it's kind of the facade of that for the French people. The people that wanted to continue to fight will either leave and go into exile, or they'll stay and they'll be considered what's called the French underground, which is very important to the war effort, and we'll talk more about that later. I don't give a lot of respect for the French government, but that is one example of something that I do respect about the French, okay? Especially during this time. Hitler forces the armistice to be signed in the same railroad car that the armistice was signed in for World War I. Very significant. Once again, we talked about the Treaty of Versailles. We talked about how it basically shaped what's going on right here, the major cause of World War II. So here's another great example. Hitler makes France sign the armistice in the same exact car that the Germans had to sign at World War I. That is very significant. He'll then destroy the car later. Okay, trying to rewrite history. France then is divided into two zones. You have the occupied North Zone, which is occupied by the Nazis. They're taking over that area. They will completely control that area. They'll immediately start building fortifications in the north along the English Channel, and we'll talk more about that down the road. And then in the southern part, you have what's called the Vichy, okay? Vichy France, and that is run by the puppet government, okay, for the Nazis. The Nazis still have control over it, but it's not necessarily occupied. The Nazis will have total free reign if they want to, but they're going to focus their forces in the north to prevent a invasion from the Allies. Okay, down south you have Spain, who's part, kind of like an ally for Hitler, but they're not involved, and then Italy, and they're allies. So don't have to worry too much about the south right now. So that's why they'll basically let that puppet government take control. Now, we talked about the Free French. Charles de Gaulle, okay, one of the most famous names in France. He will actually lead the French resistance, or the underground, and he'll flee to London and organizes the Free French government in London. Okay, and many other occupied countries will do the same. So he's going to lead the Free French government from London, and like I said, they will be a big part of the war effort. And there's Charles de Gaulle right there. Is a picture of him. And like I said, guys, probably one of the most famous Frenchmen ever. The airport is named after him, and you're not going to find a more famous guy. All right, we will stop there. Stay classy, Vandalia.